James, I want to thank you for joining. I want to thank everybody to another lunch with Jamie, or should I say coffee with Jamie. This is the first one we've done bright and early at 9 a.m. West Coast time. It's very exciting that everybody's, it shows the power, your power, James, that everybody's here this early ready for you. Um, but I've been trying to find a great time for James to do this. It's been a little hard to track down. So last time when I was in New Orleans for the Super Bowl, he doesn't know this, but I saw it. So my only goal of the Super Bowl was to find James, and thankfully the Axios people had a party that James was sitting at, I think eating some gumbo, and I cornered him and wouldn't let him leave till he agreed to do this. So James, I want to thank you again. You are always making headlines, but your recent op-ed has definitely put you at the forefront of every conversation, and
Well,
which just made it somebody we had to get on. I want to thank you also again. This Preparing for this, I had to go back and watch arguably my favorite documentary of all time, The War Room, directed by Chris Hedges and D.A. Pennebaker. And if anybody in this Lunch with Jamie and Jamie's List community has not seen that documentary, I strongly encourage you to go watch it. James now hosts a podcast called Politics War Room with Al Hunt, and amongst many other things. So, James, again, thank you for joining us.
thank you. And I'd also urge you just to look at the new documentary by Matt Turnhour, Carville, Winning is Everything, Stupid. I've been very flattered to have two expert documentarians make a movie about me. I don't know. Like Jack Benny said, I don't deserve this, but I don't deserve arthritis either. So,
I was so focused on the War Room that I forgot to mention Matt, who is a friend and that was an extraordinary film as well. Yes, everybody has a double feature to go this weekend.
there you
Uh,
go.
and as everybody in this community knows, saving democracy is at the top of my list of priorities in life. But probably the thing that's the only thing that's more important to that is where to eat. So before we dive into democracy, I have to take this opportunity to find your top spots in New Orleans these days.
Well, I get this. The dumbest question that I always get is, James, I'm going to New Orleans. I don't want to go to the French Quarter. I don't know where the locals go. Well, I don't know how to tell you this, but the locals go to the French Quarter too. Okay, I never say, well, I'll meet you at the old absent house. I'll meet you at Antoine's, Galatoire's. Okay, it's actually there are a couple of places I think that kind of stand out. I think Pesh is probably the best fish house in the country. It's all Gulf fish. They have these huge, I don't know, coal-fired, wood-fired ovens they do it in. Everything is really fresh. I think that's unique. Another really unique place to get to really experience a place called the Mosquito Supper Club. A woman named Melissa Martin is the chef, and she grew up in a place that basically doesn't exist anymore called Chauvin, Louisiana. And it's very much personal her cooking. It's very much a cooking of Gulf coastal cooking. It's unique. She writes these cookbooks that are just borderline literature. So that would be a kind of must play stop. I would do one of the Grand French Quarter restaurants, Antoine's, Arnaud's, Galatoire's, Brennan's, for sure. Commanders, how do you not? It's probably overall day in, day out, best restaurant in the country. I mean, the hospitality and volumes they have. Uh, my favorite kind of organic kind of New Orleans, the roast beef, po' boy, red beans and rice kind of place. It's a place called Orono. It's what they call Bucktown. It's right across the city line, but I think that's my favorite up in there. But 10 places like that, and all of them are good. But I like Orono. But that'd be my good one.
I love that. I love that list. And Mosquito Supper Club, I think, is the number one place to experience New Orleans today. So I love that you referenced that.
The other one I'd throw in is Clancy's because it's such a everybody's idea of what a secret. It's not very secret, okay, but it looks like, oh man, they found us in the middle of a neighborhood. They don't have any signs out there. This is really cool.
Love that. All right. Now to the main event. So, a couple weeks ago, you wrote this extraordinary op-ed that made a lot of noise and suggested the Democrats should play dead until the GOP destroys itself. Does that still apply in your mind since what's transpired in the last couple of weeks? Does it apply even more?
So you had to approach, you had, look, the condemnation was quick and depressingly predictable. So Molly Joan Fast, who's a friend of mine, is writing in Vanity Fair. We got to fight him at everything. Gavin Newsom, and it was bi-coastal. All right. So when you saw the State of the Union, do you like the Newsom Joan Fest approach of Al Green and uh, holding up auction paddles, or do you like the Carvillian approach of Alyssa Slotkin, giving a dignified, cogent, to the point response? And I hear this as we speak. I'm in San Francisco with a lot of Democratic donors, and I'm telling them the last thing we want is throwing our hands in the air, screaming, protesting, or anything like that. This is a critical time in the history of the country. I'm 80 years old. I have never, ever been not close to as afraid for the country I am now. And I think Democrats, we act like it. I think we should be determined, should be dignified, okay? And that's got to guide how we do this. This is not the time for stunts. It really isn't. And when I always say that Carville's first commandment of politics is, "Thou shalt not make a ass out of thyself." And people ought to keep that in mind.
I love that. I couldn't agree more with what you said in the op-ed, but more specifically what you just said right now. I mean, I think Alyssa Slotkin was pitch perfect. I thought her response is exactly what we needed. I didn't think Al Green's cane waving was anywhere near what should have been done. I'd go one step further, and I'm curious to your take for the State of the Union. I would go with the philosophy of killing with kindness. I think, if something's said that's undeniably positive that we can all support and agree, I think the Democrats should stand up and cheer to the point where Trump makes them sit down as opposed to the Republicans. I mean, not in a mockery way, in a genuine way. But I think that was one of the things that was most frustrating to me, is just how there were some things that seemed so nonpartisan, undeniable. And yes, obviously Trump's doing everything for theatrics, but I don't know the reason that you need to kind of stay quiet for some of those moments that just seem to be something we should all be able to agree on.
I I don't even think staying quiet is not making an ass of yourself. All right. Uh, eh, maybe they could have looked in the caucus and say, okay, we'll look for a couple of things. I don't, might be. That's the problem is we have no power. And the word that I like to use is we have to be clever. Okay. Because that's the only way that you can, and that's it. The only thing between that even allows us to get to 2026 are probably the House Democrats. They're probably the most critical people in the party now. And so if you think about what I call the possum strategy, unfortunately, 70% of the people that vote Democratic have never seen a possum. That's a problem we have. Okay. We have very low possum knowledge in the party. And we can start at that. Look at yesterday. The NASDAQ loses 4%. Elon Musk goes on Larry Kudlow and talks about eliminating Social Security and Medicare. Do you really want to get in the way of that? You're not going to, nothing you're going to say is going to work because you're not going to top that headline. Uh, then you had Musk calling Mark Kelly a traitor. Come on. But other people will take care of that. You had the Secretary of Agriculture. This is my favorite of them. Maybe this is epical. When asked about high prices, said people need to raise chickens in their backyard. I'm serious. That's kind of stuff we can talk about. They keep making mistakes. We have to keep exploiting their mistakes. And candlelight vigils don't do you any good. I'll just say this. The most useless people in the world are what they call Washington progressive advocacy groups. I mean, oh my God. I mean, they go in front of Justice Kavanaugh's house with a vigil. It's going to really change somebody's mind. But they're not worth very much. But in there, everybody is out. Yeah, we want action now. God damn it. No, you want to try, let's try being clever here for a minute before we charge the light brigade. And they have to come to us because the calendar works. They got budget problems, jet extension problems. Just old possum, just wait. They're going to come to you. And when they do,
I,
turn.
I yeah, I love that. I love that possum line. And I do think that's part of the challenge that we're facing right now is that so many people have not gotten out across the country. So many people have not gotten to spend time in different areas. And a lot of the Democrats, sort of these bases have become these kind of these cities, especially in the coastal cities and whatnot. How much of a problem do you see that is going forward? I mean, and how do you kind of change that?
Cultural elitism. I mean, what I call metropolitan triumphalism. It kills us. They give off odors, aromas that the rest of the country feels. So let me give you an example of how this starts. So I happen to remember the day. It was January the 13th, 2020. So in the Superdome, where you went to Super Bowl, LSU played Clemson for the national championship. As you know, your geography, about 80 miles apart. So the president of LSU does the most sane thing you could do. We're not going to have classes Tuesday because we don't want kids to be driving back at 1 o'clock in the morning. Probably, to be honest, they probably had inviting the little adult beverages, right? So a guy named Benjamin Applebaum, who is an editorial writer in the New York Times, tweets out, why is LSU eligible for student loan forgiveness when they're not a real school because they called off school because of a football game? That's how clueless. You know something? All of Mr. Applebaum's friends agreed with him. And that happens 1,000 times in a day. All right. Where to the Los Angeles Times did a story when our women basketball players were playing the UCLA women, and it was basically Barbie girls against street thugs. And our team is like most basketball team, probably 90% black. And but it came across that if you're not in the Los Angeles Metroplex, then you're not worth talking about. And that is an attitude again and again. I just use sports as an example that people feel like Democrats don't see them, or we are an urban party that is focused on cities, and we got to get out of that.
I couldn't agree more. I've been lucky. I went to college in Atlanta, again, metropolitan area though, but I got to make movies in Schenectady, New York, and Scranton, Pennsylvania, and the Quad Cities of Iowa. And I think that's been some of the most formative experiences of my life was getting to get out across the country. And how do you get people to experiencing that? How do you get people to open up? I mean, one of the goals of this community that I've helped to create with the people here with this Jamie's List and Lunch with Jamie is the idea to kind of bring different viewpoints together. And we have a few people who voted for Trump on this conversation. We have, a handful of Republicans. And my goal is to get people from different backgrounds and different walks of life together, but it's very hard. I mean, where do you see the opportunities going forward to actually open
Well,
people's eyes?
we have the longest societal problem in the country that we kind of, become much too tribal, and people really try to address that. And I'm sure, but right now, the short-term survival of the country as we know it is in great peril. I mean, they don't believe on limits on executive power. They believe that the president is above the law. We are siding with some of the great criminals in the world at the expense of alliances that we've had that have been kept for the most part world peace in the last 80 years. Um, and we're watching the disintegration of institutions. And I think it is a crisis of the first order. And after the Constitution is saved, if it is, and after this peril has passed, and I hope it does, but I'm not sure, then maybe we can all break bread together and talk about, ways that we can improve communications. But right now, my view is we're in a desperate fight for the survival of what we think of as the United States. And if people can't see that, I don't have time to spend time with you trying to convince you of the obvious. Just, you, yep, you think. I mean, I think we should use more humor in dealing with it. I'll never forget, Jamie. I was in Ireland. I got a lot of Carvilles in Ireland, believe it or not. And all wisdom, of course, is contained in a Dublin cab driver. And I asked him, what did he think about the reunification of Ireland? He said, shit, we can't run to 26. How can we deal with another six at 26 counties and Republican Ireland, six in Northern Ireland? So when he says these stupid things like Canada, he said, why don't you just try to run to 50? And after we get to 50 right, then we can look for the 51st. Do it in a mocking way. I mean, who thinks of this? And all these people say you vote for Trump. So in the UN, these are who you're siding with: Russia, Belarus, and North Korea. That's not the cool kids' car yet. That's not South Korea. That's not Japan. That's not France. That's not Brazil. That's not Nigeria. That's not BRICS countries. Okay, these are some of the worst, most repressive, anti-democratic regimes that you can imagine. Why are we siding with these kind of people? That's the first question I'd ask a Trump supporter. Are you on a run with these goddamn people? I don't think you do.
But I mean, I hear that and I agree with you. But at the same time, one of my goals today is kind of to reach out and trying to understand people who I have difference of opinions with, people who voted for different people. How do you find that middle ground? And I especially living where you are, I assume you interact with people from all different, political backgrounds on a regular basis. There's got to be some way to kind of come together in that.
Well, um, it really it's a laudable goal, but I think right now the country is in deep peril, and that there's a time for that. You shouldn't, I don't. And I think the idea is not so much to try to convince Trump, but to convince Trump voters. One of my ideas is to go to a county that Trump carried big. I don't know, someplace in Iowa, example, Ohio. And when you look across the board, the devastation. I mean, I can't. I'm great for reconciliation. We're getting ready to destroy rural health care in this country, and I'm going to sit down and have a beer with you to listen to, you know, how Trump won the election or some insanity like that. There's a country to save, and if you're not interested in saving it or you approve of the direction it's going in, I don't have time to convince you. I got to rally my own side to get to the next election. Then we can sit down and break bread and try to understand where each other are coming from. But it's hard to overestimate how fearful I am and how necessary I think that we have a effective and clever opposition. That's my obsession.
Yeah, I think that's well said. I think one of the challenges is, and obviously this election was not a mandate. Trump wasn't a landslide. You've seen landslides before.
Yeah,
Uh,
I've been on the other side of
yeah, exactly. And
them.
and but at the same time, it is clear that Trump and the Republicans have chipped away at the Democratic base, and I'm curious, although the numbers obviously do show some of that, the Republicans and especially Trump are so good at this marketing and so good at this messaging. Now you've heard the Democrats have lost the working class, they've lost the people, they've lost their base, although their policies still are directly things that are supporting the base versus the Trump policies, which are the opposite. So, is that true? And how do you start getting them back?
Well, okay. I think that I'm a believer in what I call big personality politics, that people actually have more effect on other people's political identity than issues or anything else. Like I was kind of Democrat when I saw Kennedy. I was inspired. I was a young Catholic guy growing up in the South who was pro-civil rights. A lot of Republicans saw Reagan and young people, forget that, Reagan was very popular among, because he was inspirational to them. I think Clinton and Obama would fit in that same, where people became part of, I wanted to be part of that. It's a cool thing. So I think we'll get, if we get a good, remember, we played the Super Bowl. Understand this. The presidential election is the equivalent of the Super Bowl. You had the Super Bowl, right? We played with our seventh string quarterback and lost by a point and a half. Supposedly we'd have played with the third string quarterback. God forbid if it would have been the first or the second string quarterback, because would have won by 6 or 7. And good candidates and good communicators can deal with these kinds of issues much more effectively. And Harris, look, was she a little better than I thought she was going to be? Yeah. I thought she was the ninth string quarterback. She was actually the seventh. But she didn't offer anybody change. They asked her on the View, what would you do different than Biden? 70% of the people wanted to change. And she said, I can't think of anything. I don't know if she really understood the country. I really don't. And if we would have had an open process of which, my idea was to have 4 big town halls, have President Clinton, President Obama moderate it, invite 7 people to it. You know how much we'd have won this election by? Shit. The talent that exists in this party that goes hidden from people is just unbelievable. And we got to figure a way to get our best players in the game now and get them off. We got 350 hitters stacked up in AAA. We'll get them out of AAA and put them on Major League.
Uh, I love that. And you have a couple of years on me. But in my political adult life, I have never seen a bench so deep in a party. And I'm curious, A, if you agree on that.
I so agree with you. It's my so I got into this big shouting match with Stephen A. Smith. All right. So Stephen A. said there's no talent in the Democratic Party. I may have to run. Come on, Stephen A. You're out of your mind. Would you? And he said, well, I'm friends with Wes Moore. I said, well, call Wes and say, if I run, it's a slippery track out there, dude. You ain't gonna play on it. I can tell you. These guys are like, you're really gonna play on the same track with Andy Bashir? I don't think you are. And there's so much talent in the party. And what the congressional Democrats have to do is they got to figure a way to put their best communicators out there. So that means the House leadership is going to say, okay, we're going to designate 8 people. All right, you got to have some diversity, but pick your best 8 communicators. Senate should pick. They got all world communication in the Senate. I mean, Ruben Gallego's all world. Warnock is 4 times all world. Chris Murphy, he's really good. Put the people that are better out there. It doesn't, and I know everybody's going to get their feelings hurt, but you're on a team, and you got to have your best players doing the best thing that they can do, and that's what we need to do. We got to have thoughtful, thought out communicators that know how to frame an issue, know how to launch an attack, know how to pivot from a charge. All of those are kind of skills that some people are just better at than other people. Why not put the best out there? And you and I are so on this. Why can't we see our best candidates? We know they're out there. We see them. We follow them. You know how good a communicator Mitch Landrieu is? Oh my God, man. I mean, that Confederate monument speech is probably one of the 5 best speeches I've ever heard in my lifetime. What are we doing with all that? And everybody thinks, oh, we coastal. Wait a minute, this guy's Look, from New Orleans, and he sounds like that. Look at Andy, a big Gretsch. They're from the rest of the country. In the all world, you got and you got a number of people. I'm not, in West and Maryland, fine. But damn, we gotta get you. That's the frustrating thing to me.
I think you just hit the nail on the head, and and the list keeps going on. I mean, that was one of my questions was to lay out some of your favorite candidates, and you name most of them. I mean, obviously you have other people like Jasmine Crockett, and you have Alyssa like we talked about, but you just keep going down. JB Pritzker, someone just mentioned.
You know
Um,
who's really good? Oh shit, the Virgin Islands delegate. I think her name is the woman is a Virgin Islands has a delegate to the Congress. I don't think they're voting, but she gets to sit in it. She's really good. It's Plaskett. I can't think of her name, but there are even ones out of. Yeah, I think a guy like Ruben Gallego is like the future of the party. I mean, it's probably not a 28 might be, but Ruben's going to be on the ticket 32, 36 for sure.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's great. So what's wrong? What's the problem? I mean, you're everybody just anointed you and the head of the Democratic Party. It's not Ken Martin, it's you. What are the 5 steps you're doing right now?
Well, I mean, the first step is we got to try to throw some sand in these gears that we're marching toward authoritarianism, anti-constitutionalism, entire disruption of the world order. And I'm not exaggerating. Okay, none of these things I'm being polemic about. I'm being, in my mind, I'm being very factual. And I think that they can facilitate it by having a mini convention in 26, inviting people to speak, because we don't have that time where people get to see what we know. And oh my God, they have people that can string a sentence together. Uh, and I think it's very valuable what Ken Martin is doing. We spent over $2 billion and we didn't get a single goddamn vote we weren't going to get in the first place. Every vote that Harris got was a vote we were going to get anyway. You and I were going to vote for her. Okay. But you never expanded. So how do we had more money. All right. Future Forward had over $1 billion. The campaign had billion, I don't know, but it's all told probably $1.5 billion. And I'm sorry, we need to look at how that money was spent and why it went to no avail. And if we don't do that, oh, James, you can't look back. When there's an airplane crash, you know what the one thing they do? They look back. Okay. Yeah, they look back. When there's a military operation, you have an after action report. They look back, oh, you didn't do this, you should have done that. That's the nature of life. We need to determine where the money went and why, how could it go to more effective places? Because what we didn't do much.
Yeah. I love that idea of the mini convention. And I noticed at the convention this year, what people don't realize is that the convention really is a meeting of the state parties to actually, nominate somebody. And there's actual work being done, and there's actual all these parties are coming together. That happens regularly anyway. So in some ways, you could use that as a sort of annual, more public event that's actually got some spectacle and theatrics and put together to highlight some of these people. And it's actually something that is not just kind of, I don't want to call it a sideshow, but something that's just happening in the inner guts of the party and not publicly.
Uh, Jamie repeated, I'm sorry, I did.
No. I was saying it's right. No, I was saying is that the convention in essence almost happens every year in a sense. It's only kind of where you're nominating a president every 4 years, but there
Yeah,
is
but the
some.
mini convention would show people you're going to be 2 years out, all right? And they've done it before, and you invite 6, 7 people, and you let people start running and let the message and your skill sort of filter out there. And you tell people, hope is coming. The cavalry is on the way, and I think that means a lot.
Let's shift to the news media because one thing I've talked about is this idea that if you can't get facts out to the public, it's very hard to run a true democracy. And I think you've seen the cable news networks. I've found this kick of how I think they should have the word news kind of stripped from their title because majority of the shows are no longer news. And I think that podcasting has obviously become a major area of focus, and we've talked about the podcasting election. But again, there's limited facts, and people are being checked on those. So, what do you think we're looking at in the state of news in our country today?
I I get asked this question a lot, and I'm not a. And so I was at the UVA with the film, and a professor said, "What's the next new thing in politics?" And I said, "Nothing. There never is a new thing in politics. Now, you have new ways of communications. Right? Obviously, you had the print and press, you had the radio, you had TV, you had the internet. And now you got AI or something. All right, now you have all kind of. Used to be you'd go to the Times and meet the press, and that was pretty standard. That's not the same as it was before. But it's the young people like you that live in this space to figure out how how we get to more people more effectively. And we're not, and they're about 16 light years ahead of us. That's just not things I think about. And it's just the whole landscape has just changed dramatically under me.
All right, well, let's talk a bit about podcasting. That's obviously an area that you're focusing on now, and in particular, I'm curious if you've listened to Governor Newsom's podcast and what your take is on his new venture, and is that something you want to see from more people?
So, one thing about Governor Newsom, he's a very good communicator. I mean, he's kind of fearless. Remember, he had the Sean Hannity debates and that kind of stuff. And I think so the issue is what I call the high school track meet. All right. That's and of course somebody decided that this was the civil rights of our era, and the public never went along with it. And but I'd say is let the High School Athletic Association deal with this. This is just not something that's big on my mind. But I think he spoke. I mean, Seth Moulton had said the same thing. It's obvious the public is not ready for this. And what you generally do if you have a movement is you try to change minds by changing the public's minds, but you don't go to the Democrats and say, look, we know 68% of the people are against this, but in order to be courageous, you have to be for it. That doesn't. If you remember your history, Lincoln didn't like slavery, but that wasn't. He was willing to compromise to put it off to save the Union, and one day he knew it would be gone, and unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, Southern states started a war over and lost it. But you got to advance public opinion along with your ideas, and the people that advocate for these kinds of things that are not very effective at moving the public in that direction.
Do you think my father taught me at an early age the concept of mea culpa, and it worked very well for me as someone who got in trouble in high school.
Deo mente beate Maria, semper Renee, Johannes, Mea Culpa, Mea Maxima Culpa, Ideo Precor. I can still get a pretty good riff of the Confidia in Latin, so I know about Mea Culpa.
It seems like in politics that's not employed very often. And in my opinion, I think that nothing shows more strength than saying something was my fault. I was wrong. I've learned. And I'm going to be better. Gavin Newsom finally answered the French Laundry question very well in his podcast and said it was the biggest bonehead move he'd made, and he was wrong, and so on and so forth. Trump has proved the opposite, where you never admit you're wrong and you just continue to lie. Where do you, if you were advising candidates today who make mistakes, who say the wrong thing, who change their opinions, where do you think that fits?
So there's one overarching truth. This Trump, we know that. He lies all the time. It's documented. I think like 33,612. You can look it up. All right. He lies every day. And people say, well, why don't the Democrats do that? Because Democrats, in this fundamental way, are fundamentally different than Republicans. We think, why would you tell a lie? That's not true. Why would you say that? They affirmatively want to be lied to. So if they say the Haitians are eating cats in Springfield, although it's demonstratively not true, oh, you know they doing that, James. Come on, these people come in this country, they eat cats. Hey, I saw a story when they were eating babies. All right. You go to Doge and you say, oh, come on, man, that whole government spends $6.75 trillion. Hey, they're throwing away trillions of dollars. You already, and then they said, well, look, they haven't found it. Oh, but oh, no. There's a code. They justify. They don't care. They like to be lied to. And Democrats, if I did, or any Democrat, if I went on the show and I said something demonstrably false, you would say, well, you can't say that.
I,
I
I'm
mean,
gonna push back a little bit because I do think you have a group of people who are sort of just diehard or in this MAGA cult who believe everything that Donald Trump said. I do think you have another group of Republicans and conservatives who would agree that those things are false and that things that Donald Trump said are crazy, but just ultimately believe that the policies that have been employed over
all
the
right, so what policy does Trump have that someone would like? Do you really? Trump, well, first of all, most of these people consider themselves conservative Republicans. Do you know what president has accumulated the most debt of any president in the history of the United States? Donald Trump. So you can't like his fiscal policies and say you're conservative, right? What do you like his policy of teaming up with Belarus and Russia and North Korea? What policy do you like?
well, listen,
I'm not, but I'm being, I hear that sometimes. Okay, tell me the policy that you like. I don't, James, I don't like the tweets and the attacks, but I do like the policy. Okay, great. Let's talk about policies that you like.
the idea that I'm now going to be put in the place to defend Trump policies is going to be very unique. But what I would say is that, and I've said this multiple times, there are so many things that 90% of Americans, can agree upon, right? Like we all want a tougher stance at the border. No, nobody wants illegal immigration. I mean, it's just not, that's an insane
You know
thing
what
to
this
think.
are? And Biden's, by the time Trump took office, the border was totally a fine place. So okay, it is fair to say that Biden listened to some goofy ass leftists and allowed the border to get away from us. By the time he took off, it was under control. So again, I'm anxious to know the policy because I hear this a lot. I don't like this, but I like, okay, what policy? You like the policy of slashing the national parks? Or maybe you like the policy of having a chicken coop in your backyard to deal with high eggs. I don't know. But I don't think some people that go out of their way to try to say, well, they got a point. If you accept lies, you're going to get lies. And if you say, well, I don't care if I get lied to, just so I get a tax cut. Okay, that's the kind of person you are. You put a tax cut ahead of the truth. Great. I don't agree with you.
I think to some extent, I think, James, I would argue that's a messaging issue, right? I think that, and it's taking the wins and highlighting the things that are being done, because I think ultimately, and you've said this on Piers Morgan's podcast or conversation where you talked about the idea that you've criticized the far left, calling them idiots, I think, on that
Very,
podcast.
very.
And what I would say is that, if you take these slogans, right, defund the police, no Democrat believes in defunding the police. It's just full stop. You have a couple of fringe people who said it, and then the Trump world lit it on fire and turned into a wildfire. So I think that's the issue.
All right, I hear this. Okay. So defund the police, our identity was very counterproductive, very stupid thing that we went through. You know how many self-described Democrats, the percent of self-described Democrats that describe themselves as progressive liberal is about 12%. What percent of the Republican Party describes themselves as MAGA loving? 70%? And so when people engage in both siderisms, well, look, you got to defund the police, which admittedly no one says anymore, and everyone said it was a huge mistake. And you got the people that want to annex the Panama Canal. Or you got the people that think that Haitian immigrants are eating dogs. Well, it's kind of the same thing. Although it's 12% of one party, 70% of the other party. One was just some naive do-gooders trying to change dictionaries. It's not the same thing. And when you get it to say, if you want to tell me the Democratic Party is constipated, I'd say yes. Oftentimes we're constipated. They're evil. There's no middle ground. So where do I do? Let's triangulate constipation and evil. Well, where does that come out on the chart? And people will go out of their way. How could you appoint Bobby Kennedy? What's the middle ground of Bobby Kennedy being a health secretary, and you have an outbreak, a bad outbreak of measles, and talking about eating bananas or whatever he's doing? Kash Patel to FBI. What's the argument for that? Somebody help me here. Tulsi Gabbard, the DNI. Help me. What's the middle ground here? How can we sit down and have a beer and talk about this? You can't. It's crazy. And you know, you can look for the middle ground so hard that you lose your footing. And but yeah, it was the identity politics flirtation. I wrote a piece in the spring of 2021 said this stuff is killing us. And everybody goes, oh, well, you can't, James. Of course, these people had no power. They can't cancel you from anything. It was very stupid. We came to realize it was very stupid. So when it's all over, they say, well, we didn't run on that. Well, but they did. They didn't forget about it. Harris was actually for paying for transition surgery for prisoners. That's a pretty goddamn dumb idea if I ever heard one. But that we're against the wall here, man. We got an entire country, and we may lose. We may lose. The whole goddamn thing may go under.
I can't argue anymore. I can't. I've lost my ability to defend Tulsi Gabbard and Kash Patel.
So if you stop and you think about it, Jamie, it's worse than you think. You know,
Yeah.
you get up and you say, "Well, all right, I'm gonna try to take we'll try to have a better attitude about this. I'm gonna try to do what you do. You try to look for good, intrinsic good in every human being, and then you think about it. You go, "Oh shit, it's worse than I thought it was."
Yeah. We're gonna get to questions in a minute, but I am curious. You know, playing dead is not going to work for a lot of people. So, and I would argue people need to also just enjoy the good things that are in their lives if they can, and not get caught up in this 24/7. But for people who want to leave this conversation and go do something, uh, what would you tell them? What
Well,
would you
first of all,
suggest?
let's talk about playing dead. Okay, opossum or tactical reset or retreat. You know who was the greatest possum player we ever had? G is in George Washington. What are you talking about? George Washington founded the country. But yeah, when the British came in ashore on Long Island, you know what he did? He pulled back. He retreated to across the Delaware from Trenton. And what happened at Trenton? We won. But he knew to play possum, to sucker them in, get the Continental Army in place, and then win the battle. Had he decided to challenge the British at Long Island, he would have gotten waxed. All right. Playing possum is not giving up. When Napoleon invaded Russia in 1812, what did Kusatov do? Pull back, pull back, pull back, come in, come in. And then what happened? Not good things. It was bad. It was really bad. So you got to understand that you use tools that are in your toolbox. And retreat, terrible word, but retreat is very much in the toolbox of smart strategists. And they didn't give up. He just moved the front to a more favorable place for him. And that's something that you see in politics. And you got to let them in, because the markets are crashing, because they never liked this. They never were going to like it. They're already fighting with each other. And Trump is like, I need for Elon and Marco to get along. Like I said last night on television, he's the Rodney King of American politics. Why can't we just all get along here? And it's I wish I had a more optimistic outlook. And all I can say is justification. Is somebody a few years ago, and I'd hear this a lot, said, man, James, you can say shit no one else can say and get away with it. So they're probably right. So if I can say shit that no one else can say and get away with it, then I'm going to say shit that no one else can say, because I'm going to get away with it. And what I do is I write a piece in the New York Times, and I said, the Democratic campaign culture is too feminine. There are too many preachy women in Democratic campaign culture. Well, everybody's fucking erupting and screaming in Cro-Magnon, and he lives in the last century. And then people said, you know what? We don't do very well with males, do we? We're getting cream. Maybe the guy has a point. Yeah, maybe the guy has a point. But if you don't throw it out there and provoke the conversation, if you say, well, in my analysis, Democrats have difficulty getting penile-oriented people to vote Democratic, that's bullshit. Okay? By the way, a lot of coastal culture is don't the NPR people hate football, they hate hamburgers, they hate beer. Well, most people like hamburgers, like football, and like beer. Sorry, they just do. That doesn't make me a toxic male or anything like that. Just I like hamburgers and I like football and I like beer. Sure, I like shrimp po' boys better, but it's okay.
So if people want to employ George Washington philosophy after getting off this Zoom, what are they doing?
We see that they're coming to us for votes on the debt limit. Okay. They're gonna probably have to come to us on there's gonna be a hard time getting all the people they need to get their budget through. We have an election in Virginia that is just so big that I can't tell you how big it is and how much consequence it's going to have. In the interim, we got a big Supreme Court race April 1st. We need to put some wins on the board. And I think once we put wins on the board, attitude to start to change. But people don't like the Democratic Party. Democrats don't like the party because we lost the election. And that's why we exist. That's the highest principle of American politics, is actually winning the election. And I've seen people say, Bernie Sanders said, it's more important to have the argument than win the election. No, no. It's more important to win the election than have the argument. All right. It's more important that we stand on principle and freedom than we win the election. No. Win the election, then stand on principle and freedom. There's nothing more sacred, more holy, more precious, more ethical, more moral, more visionary than winning the goddamn election. That's it. That's the biggest thing you can do. And if you don't believe me, see how you feel today. We didn't win, and I'm not happy.
Uh, no one can say that better. I want to go to a couple questions before we let you go. First is to Matt Carrots, who is a friend of mine who worked in real estate and finance and LA deputy mayor, and also cousin of Dean Phillips.
Okay, wow.
And so, Matt, can you ask your question?
Sure. Good morning, James. Thanks for being with us.
Yeah.
I hear you with our party's failure to communicate effectively to the country. I hear you say that we have an extraordinary bench, which I agree. I agree that the DNC is the puppeteer to all the dollars being spent politically. Isn't that ultimately Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries, who are really the bosses to the DNC, and their failure to really put in place a mechanism for our talented bench to shine? Because as us elitists on this coast, we don't get exposure to the center leadership, the center of the country. How do we actually get excited that there are extraordinary alternatives who are going to have access to dollars to promote their brand and give us a brighter future?
Okay. So one thing that the DNC, that Ken Martin, and I'm not a, one time they asked this pissy art critic, what do you think of Leroy Neiman? And he said, frankly, I never think of Leroy Neiman. Okay. I've never thought much about the DNC, but there's one thing that the new chairman is doing, is they're going through the expenditures. We spent $2.5 billion and didn't get a single vote of what we're going to get when we started. So to the extent that the DNC has the power to do this and make these findings public so we can see that, I also think that they can play a role, as I talked to Alan about earlier, have a mini convention in 2026 and invite all this talent, actually get our talent on the field as early as we possibly can. Now, Schumer and Hakeem, they can do so much. They obviously have to be very clever at, legislative strategy and manipulation, or whatever term you want to use, but they're not going to be the face of the party. And the face of the party is always the presidential nominee. And as fast as we can, we can't put the election date any sooner than it is, but we can start showcasing this talent pretty early on. And I think when people see it, I think they're going to respond positively to it. But the party doesn't have a leader, and it will not have a leader until it has a presidential nominee. But that's always been the case. Always been the case.
All right, thanks for that. Okay, we're going to go to Michael R. Jackson, who is just a brilliant Tony-winning playwright and composer, and he has a question for you.
Sure.
Hi, James. I am sort of curious about why there is not more open debate within the Democratic Party about culture and policy. And by that, I mean foreign policy, economic policy, social policy. I've been on these Zooms before, and even before the election, something I noticed that there wasn't a mini convention. We sort of just anoint these people. I don't really know where the Democrats really stand beyond these sort of slogans about quote unquote saving democracy. And I understand that that's important, but I feel like, you mentioned having this, mini convention in 2026. Could that not also be an opportunity for Democrats to really hash out real differences to define the party, especially a party that's perceived as being so out of touch with the American people?
Okay. So let's back up. So Harris, first of all, I think there was an act of cowardness that no big name got in against Biden. Okay. Congratulations, Dean Phillips. At least you did something. Okay. And everybody didn't want to offend him, but it wasn't good. So when we run the general election campaign, there were two things. My criticism of the Harris campaign is they didn't go economically far enough to the left. Why didn't we talk about raising the frickin' minimum wage? Okay, it's been the same since 2009. America needs a raise. Why? When you talk to young people, they don't feel like this economy works for them. They don't feel like they can afford a house. They all have student debt, or they're all living at home. They're getting help from their parents for rent. So say we're going to raise taxes of people over $400,000. We're going to establish a first-time home buyers mortgage relief fund or rental assistance. That way, you're telling people, "I see you." If I'm a young person and all I hear is Democrats talking about how great the economy is, I go, "What's that son of a bitch talking about? They ever try to buy a house in these interest rates?" And you got to do. And the reason they didn't do it is because the people running the campaign were lobbyists. So they were working to preserve carried interest, which is the most immoral part of the tax code there is. And so one of the things that I want to see the Democrats run on more is economic morality, if you will, or seeing people and getting help to the people that actually need the help and talking about that and drawing contrast about it. And it just drives me crazy that people actually voted Republican because they thought they were better on the economy. Name me one economic statistics that Republicans outperform Democrats on. You cannot, because none exists. In this century, under Democrats, 50 million jobs have been created. Under Republicans, 1 million. I'm sorry, 50 to 1 is a big win. And we can talk about these priorities in a way that it drives it home to voters, and the voters see it. So the young voters, they didn't turn out because they saw us as not standing up for their own interests, not seeing the issues that they had. And, you know, a lot of preachy people telling them what's good for them and bad for them. And, you know, never drink beer, never do this, never do that, always wear a condom. And people, and I'm tired of listening to that shit all day, you know, and it wears them out. But I think we got to do much better at seeing people and drawing a contrast about what's going on in this country. I am actually not, I don't think, I think we could have ran a more economically populist campaign.
Yeah, we just don't promote the issues that we've excelled at, and it's led to where we are today. I'm gonna let you have the last word here, James. I really appreciate the time you've given us and everything you do, and your voice is powerful, so keep using it. I just again, I just appreciate everything.
Well, thank you, Al. And it was great and questions, and so great that you're getting so many people, talented people involved. And I'm glad to talk to you. What I'd say is we're going to have to exercise a little unity, a little patience. It's not going to be long. We got things that are coming up on the calendar. In when the most dangerous thought process in the world is, I've learned this very, very much the hard way. Something must be done. This is something. Therefore, let's do this. Back up. Something must be done. But what must be done has to be clever. It has to be strategic. And it has to draw certain points home. So just doing something is not going to stop this. And I think we have smart alternatives. I think we have some smart people. I know that Hakeem and Senator Schumer are going to have to step. They're going to have to really get their game going better than they ever had it. I hope that they do, because that's the leadership we got in place, and that's what we go on the post with. And I think that to the extent that I can influence a conversation by being on shows like yours or writing op-ed pieces, I'm going to keep doing it, and I'm going to keep urging that we understand the perilous moment that we're in, and that we rise to the occasion to deal with it. And that's my fondest hope.
Great. Thank you. Well, everybody go watch James's new documentary, watch The War Room, follow his podcast, and James.
Can I make one
Yes,
other movie
please.
recommendation? Okay. Watch a movie called Crisis by a director named Robert Drew. Robert Drew is the father of this whole Pennybacker was like the assistant cameraman on that shoot. And I'm not even going to tell you what it's about. And it's the most compelling look inside a political crisis that I've ever seen. And it really is about, it's a documentary about that's accurate. Okay. The other movie that I loved was the Lincoln movie. I mean, geez, that was how hard it was to just get one thing done. The difficulty of getting the ball in the end zone. All right. When they were trading postmasterships and God knows whatnot. So anyway, I would do. I certainly thank you for the kind words. I'll be very proud of the War Room. We're very proud of the new Matt Tyrnauer movie. I hope that you watch it. And if you watch Crisis, you'll get a civic education unlike any civic education you ever got in your life.
I will go watch that tonight. So James, thank you very much, and say hi to New Orleans for me when you get back there. It's my favorite city.
Thank you.
All right.
You bet. So I'll tell you a story, but your dad, Alan Leventhal and all of them were trying to get me to go to Boston in '92. And I said, look, I don't leave the headquarters. If I start going to Boston, and the people in LA are going to want me to go to LA, and the people in, Chicago. And so finally, Clinton called me and he says, goddamn, James, they're driving me crazy. Go to Boston and do the goddamn fundraiser. So I said it to your dad, Alan, somebody. I said, okay, I'll go, but I've never been on the field at Fenway Park. And I want to do that. So they said, all right. So we go in there, go through the shoot. It's, I don't know, hour and 15 minutes before game starts. And not having bad practice. Don Zimmer is coach at the Red Sox, and he's sitting on top of the bench. And I said, Jim, you remember a guy from Baton Rouge named Matt Batts? And he spit and he said, catcher. And that's all he said. And I was like, I got Don Zimmer to respond to me. How cool was that? And there's actually a baseball player called Matt Batts. And he was a print in Baton Rouge. He died some years ago. But that the Zim would give me a one-word reply. It was just awesome, man. It was one of the great moments in my life.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, glad he got you to Boston.